As a non-technology founder, you have an idea, but how do you turn that idea into reality? The decision that most founders make is that they need to outsource development of the software to an agency, but there is a major problem with that. In my experience, having worked with founders for 20 years, most of the projects that I've had to rescue have been because the agency made some critical mistakes that left the founders at best out of pocket and at worst out of pocket but without any outputs they could actually use to build a business with. Being a non-technology founder who's outsourcing their MVP through an agency is hard. It's really hard. And in this video, I'm going to go through how you can successfully outsource your MVP as a non-technology founder. Okay. So here's what we're going to do. 1, I'm going to reframe what an MVP is so that you have a better chance of successfully outsourcing. 2, I'm going to show you how agencies work so that you have a better chance of successfully outsourcing. 3, I'm going to show you how to select an agency that you're likely to have success with. And 4, I'm going to show you how to instruct that agency to build your software and show you how to manage that agency throughout the process so that you, guess what, have a better chance of successfully outsourcing. The reason why we have to go through a reframing process so that we look again at the definition of MVP is because the wild success of the concept of MVPs over the past decade or so means that the basic idea behind them has been lost. MVP stands for minimum viable product, but everybody now is fixated on the minimum, but it's the viable part that is the most important. We get the idea of MVPs from a book by Eric Ries called The Lean Startup. This book has been so successful that it spawned a movement, and now all startup businesses operate on the principles in this book. But to understand the principles, we need to understand the history. Back in the day, the way that technology businesses would pop into existence is that someone would have an idea, ask a software team to develop it, and that software team would take the stairs into the basement, build some software, not talk to anyone, and emerge blinking into the light 6 to 9 months later, only to find that the customer hated what they'd built. The problem for the new business was that they had then spent all the money and had got nothing usable. The developers had had lots of fun, however. Effectively, people were creating holiday camps for software developers, which was really only good news for the software developers. The lean startup approach dictates that more experimentation is required, that rather than disappearing off and not talking to a customer before the money was spent, you build a bit, show the customer, listen to what they said, build a bit more, show the customer, and rinse and repeat. Where this has got distorted over the past 10 years is that this idea was about experimentation, not the total spend. You'd spend the same amount of money using a lean approach as opposed to a fat approach, the non-lean, but you would just increase your chance of having something, and here comes that word, that at the end was viable. I suspect Eric Ries chose the word MVP for its snappiness rather than its laser-accurate etymology, especially as MVP means something culturally within the US that it doesn't mean within the UK. It's muddled up because the viable refers to the business, not the product. It should really be the minimum amount of product that we can build to demonstrate that we have a viable business. But that's not snappy, and that wouldn't have created a best-selling book. In order to have a viable business, you need to be able to sell your product and have a cost base that is low enough to afford some profit, not just once, but over the long term. This is where things get really distorted because the focus on the minimum product as opposed to a viable business means that within the echo chamber of the community that support non-technology founders to build technology businesses, all the chatter is around short-term moves as opposed to long-term sustainability. Where this comes to a head is when you are relying on using an agency to build your solution. So let's look at how agencies work. I am going to come straight out and say it. Agencies exist to augment existing technical teams. They should not be a business's only team. That noise you can hear from outside wherever you are right now is every agency owner in the world yelling at their screen right now. Agencies hate this because they position themselves as being a partner that you can hand off work to completely, but when it comes to software development, that is straight up not true. Outsourcing software to an agency is not like a customer-supplier relationship, like getting someone to empty the bins in the office and run the Hoover around. An outsourcing agency must be a delivery partner. However, you are the one that needs to run the relationship and direct the work. They are helping you to deliver, not being the be-all and end-all of delivery. And this is where non-technology founders, when they start to engage agencies, tend to misunderstand the nature of the relationship, and that gets some bad results. The reality is that in order to get good results from an agency every time, there has to be a technology person within the business that is guiding the agency, because the agency is augmenting your technical team, not just existing as your whole technical team. Practically, this means that you need to have a technical co-founder or a CTO to do that job, because just having at least one technology person within the business gets the agency into this augmentation mode where you're guaranteed good results. However, if YouTube has recommended that you watch this video, you likely don't have a technical co-founder or a CTO, so what do? The founder of a business will sit somewhere on a continuum of being product-led on one side and sales-led on the other side. Product-led founders will spend a lot of time and attention fixating on creating a beautiful product that customers will love. The challenge there, though, is that product-led founders can fixate so much on perfecting the product that they never bother doing the vulgar part of actually selling it. Sales-led founders love an opportunity and are hyper-focused on listening to the customer's needs and then doing whatever needs to be done to meet that need. The phrase to watch here is, yes, we can do that, whereupon the actions after the meeting are all hands on deck, with everyone trying to work out how to deliver what has been promised. For a non-technology founder, the rule is that you can offset the fact you don't have a technology person within the business so long as you are highly product-led. We'll see why this is as we go on to part 4. As a rule, non-technology people who are outsourcing software development can make the situation work by focusing on product, but cannot make the situation work by focusing on sales. No technology person, but a product-led non-technology founder is okay. Has a technology person with a product-led non-technology founder, also okay. Has a technology person but is sales-led, that's also okay. But no technology person, whether non-technical founder is sales-led, that is not okay, and or here be dragons. All of this is because agencies can effectively execute when they are told to build something specific, but will usually fail spectacularly if there is less specificity over what they are building. A product-led approach is highly specific, but risks being inflexible, but a sales-led approach is very, very flexible, but highly non-specific. What actually happens behind the scenes with a sales-led approach and a technology person within the business is that that technology person is implementing measures to support greater levels of flexibility without the rest of the business necessarily needing to know that this is being done. It's kind of like hygiene measures. They will just do it automatically. You can do this when using an agency because all that's happening is the technology person is just feeding in additional work to add flexibility. What you get is all part of the magic. An agency will not add in things that are not specifically requested. This isn't a criticism of how agencies work, it's just economics. Agency work is expensive to produce, so the approach is to cut everything very close to the bone from the agency's perspective. If the customer asks for something, it will be built, but if the customer does not specifically ask for it, it will not be built. For a non-technology founder, if you're very product focused, you naturally have a clear end goal, and that end goal can be expressed as a piece of software. And the agency will likely hit the target you describe because that is what their business is. They will deliver whatever it is that you describe. The trick here is that even if you're a very sales-led person, you'll be an order of magnitude less successful unless you fix your approach on having a very product-led interaction with the agency. Avoid the dragons, be product-led. So this one is simple. Ask a friend to recommend one. If you are a non-technology founder, qualifying and choosing an agency is very difficult. You can make this a great deal easier if you just ask someone that you trust. Let's just unpack what we mean by outsourcing, and then we'll come back to how you might find an agency. Within the software industry, when we think about outsourcing, we have a word that goes along with this, which is offshoring. We do this because some while back, some bright spark worked out that if we hire developers in particular India, we can spend less than if we hire a developer in the UK. However, what we also worked out was that it was quite difficult to offshore in this way and to get good results without developing specialist skills in specifically managing offshore developers. And so another bright spark hit upon this idea of offshoring to Eastern Europe, where the pricing was still cheaper than the UK, but not as cheap as if it was sent over to Asia. But that for whatever reason, it was easier to instruct developers in, for example, Poland than it was in Pakistan. Outsourcing to Eastern Europe is roughly 50% cheaper compared to the UK, and outsourcing to Asia is roughly 70% cheaper. But it still holds that it's generally easier to manage nearshore developers in Eastern Europe than offshore developers elsewhere. If you're in the UK, outsourcing to a company in the UK isn't the default way that outsourcing is done. Most non-technology founders are sent off on a mission to find an overseas agency to provide their software. Happily, because most outsourcing companies rely on trade from overseas, they are almost all very good or better at that client engagement piece. So you should find that both the hygiene pieces like contracts and paperwork, along with the day-to-day working with the agency, is just as straightforward dealing offshore as when dealing with a domestic business. But how do you find one if you can't rely on a recommendation? One thing you can do is just open LinkedIn and wait 5 minutes, and one of them will send you a direct message trying to sell you outsource software development, because that is the level of spam that you get on LinkedIn for outsourced software development. I am half kidding, but I would definitely socialize a query on LinkedIn. Using LinkedIn to find any time a technical resource is far more effective than using Google. So even if you can't find a direct recommendation from your network, using LinkedIn to source a secondary recommendation is usually the way to go. I would also ensure that you get at least 4 quotes, not 3, and definitely not 2. Over the years, I've spoken to plenty of founders who have straightforwardly just overpaid for outsourced agency work because they hadn't got that benchmark baseline pricing dialed in. I would try as far as you can to ensure that the agency has a scale such that they are likely to have enough cash in the bank to reimburse you if it all goes to custard, but you need to ensure they're small enough to care about your project. You can only really get the answers to that question by asking them what their average project size is and how many projects they do of that size each year. The average project size should be around about the size of your project to 1.5 times the size of your project, and they should be running 4 to 5 projects of that size at any one time. Counterintuitively, it's not massively important that they have built projects like yours before, mainly because if you're doing it right, there shouldn't be enough projects like your one, such that a random outsourced agency in India or Thailand or Estonia has built something like it before. But there does need to be some alignment in type of customer. For example, in direct-to-consumer work, the way an app looks and feels is really important. Less important if you're building a business-to-business tool to support the construction industry. Try to aim for some alignment in the type of end user, but the actual specifics, e.g. sector experience, is not terribly important. Once you have that short list of 4, it's just a matter of choosing the one that engenders the most trust and is close to the average cost profile. At this point, we know that we need to be A, building a product that supports a viable business, not just trying to rush the first thing we think of out to market, and B, looking from a product-led perspective, and C, working with an agency that's likely overseas and has ideally come from a recommendation. But in any case, we know that we're paying a fair price, and we know the agency is at a scale where the work they are doing for us is important to them. And that D, the agency is a delivery partner of our business, and whilst they manage the project, we are in control of the project. Back in the days when people used to be scared of computers, as opposed to now when everyone spends half their lives using a supercomputer they carry around with them 24/7, one thing you could say to someone who is anxious about computers is that they only do what you tell them to do. Engaging an agency is exactly like that. They will only do what you tell them to do. Ergo, what you tell them to do is important. If you look on my channel for other videos about how you actually do software product design and instructing an agency, but as a quick introduction to the topic, product design is all about considering the user journey and working to remove friction from the customer experience. What this boils down to is thinking about outcomes. There's an adage in sales, which to be honest, I love so much I wish I could marry it, which is if someone walks into a DIY store and buys a drill bit, they are not buying a drill bit, they are buying a hole. The product is a drill bit, yes, but the outcome is the ability to make a hole in whatever thing it is that they own, which should have a hole in it, but at the moment does not. To conceptualize this, people don't use Tinder, they want a date. People don't post on Instagram, they want connection through engagement. People don't use Ringo or one of 8.2 trillion parking apps because they need to pay for parking, they want to avoid getting a parking ticket. Software product design is like this in that what you are trying to do is help the user go through a transformation, and the product will be better the more you are able to understand where they start, understand where they need to be, and can visualize how to get them from start to end in a manner that they will experience as delightful. Different people have different philosophies about how software should work, but for me, for whatever reason, software should be delightful, so that's the term I use. It's shorthand for whatever passion or X factor you want to introduce into your work. The agency is going to require you to describe what the software should do in a clear and precise way. As a non-technology person, this is likely to be the first time you've done this, so you'll almost certainly be on a learning journey. In order for the agency to have quoted you in the first place, you would have had to express to them at a high level, although in detail, what the main flows of the software actually are. They can't quote you if they do not understand the vision of what you are trying to build. But that's at a really high level. In the day-to-day, when you come to do the actual work, this vision has to be broken down into smaller and smaller parts, and each needs to be described in greater and greater detail. Very accessible way to do this for non-technology founders is via user stories, which are literally just little descriptions of the user as they work through each part of the system and what they experience. I don't have time here to go into massive detail about user stories. Check out my channel for more. But as a basic rundown, they are literally just a narrative description of how some function within the software should work. Eventually, you'll write enough user stories so the whole vision of your product is captured. And as you test and experiment with customers, that vision will end up aligning beautifully, delightfully even, with the customer's needs. For example, if you're building an app that allows someone on a building site to record snags, i.e. mistakes, in a new house that's been built, a user story might say something like, once a user is logged in, they can see a list of plots within the building site. They can select the plot they're interested in and then select Add Snag to add a new snag. A new screen appears that allows the user to take photos of the issues and add a description. It is not necessary to take any photos, but it is necessary to add a description. Hopefully that story there is so easy to understand that even as you're reading it, you're able to visualize how that feature would work, even though you haven't seen the software before. If you and others in your business can understand it, it should be a certainty the agency will understand it too. As you build a better relationship with your agency and work more together, you should get better and better at writing stories, and your final vision should become more and more clear. There are a bunch of other things that needs to go into the process of effectively engaging an outsourced software project, but this idea of being able to express the product as a series of small user stories that all fit nicely together is at the core of it. Then, as the project progresses, you just need to make sure you keep your product owner hat on in order to make sure that what you are building aligns with the customer needs. Then we come back full circle to what we're supposed to be doing in relation to all this lean startup stuff. Just keep testing and experimenting with actual users. That whole process will almost certainly, I'm willing to guarantee it, to be honest, you will get to a position where your version 1 MVP is an effective product that lets you build a viable business. Some YouTubers have sponsors, but I sponsor my own videos. So here's a message from me, my own sponsor. If you're a non-technology founder starting a technology business, I have a self-paced course on my website that takes you from the idea you have to having a fully operational and profitable technology business startup. I'll show you in the course how to get your MVP built, how to find product market fit, how to get traction, and from that traction either build your pitch deck and financials to get seed investment, or turn that traction into the cash flow you need to get your startup to scale up. There's a link in the description, or just head to fractionalmatt.com/course. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you next time.